Greetings and welcome on board our Roundtable program. I'm Mark Lawrence. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of a high school football preview, but we're going to do it through the eyes and experiences of some folks who have been on the sidelines of the high school football games around here. Some have been coaches in our region who gained a great deal of notoriety. Others have been really around the whole country coaching at other locations and are here to tell us that really football has evolved a little bit. The game is the same, and there's some great character to be developed on the football field. So we're going to talk about that a little bit today as well. We're glad to say that we have 5 high school football coaches with us, and we brought in order to help ask some informed questions. Kevin Herr is here. Kevin Herr is WKOK's play-by-play announcer for Shikellamy High School football. By the time you hear this broadcast, we're pre-recording it. By the time you hear it, his first high school football game will be 5 days away of this season anyway. He is not anywhere close to being prepared, and I don't anticipate he will be by the time you hear this either.
Probably true.
But with that, we welcome Kevin back to our microphones here, of course. Kevin.
Thank you, Mark.
Also on the show today, on my immediate left, Dave Six is here. He was an athletic director and a head football coach at the Milton Area School District. Also was involved in coaching high school football in Ohio. Folks who are really perceptive will remember his 1 year as an assistant coach at the Susquehanna University football program. Welcome on our show, Dave. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Phil Lockoff is with us on the program today. He is a Pennsylvania Hall of Fame wrestling coach, but also was an assistant on the football sidelines with one of our coaches that here. He was an assistant high school football coach at Shikellamy. Welcome aboard, Phil.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks for coming on our show. Ray Patios is here. Folks who know Lewisburg sports know him. He was the head coach of the football at Lewisburg for a number of years and a head coach of wrestling as well in the Lewisburg area school district. Also played at Penn State, and he'll be the first to tell you that you probably recognize his name because of his famous brother, Myron Patios. So with that, we welcome Ray on board. Thanks for coming on, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Dick Hort is back at the microphone here. He helps do play-by-play here at WKOK. He was an assistant coach at Montgomery, a Shikellamy assistant coach, and an assistant at Susquehanna. Have you ever been a head coach anywhere?
Nope.
Okay, always just worked under great coaches and helped to make sure the offenses and defense message got across the board. He played at the University of Buffalo, and that's a pretty good asterisk for our program today because he played under a noted coach, Buddy Ryan of the Philadelphia Eagles. So welcome on board, Dick. Thanks for coming.
Thanks a lot, Mark.
I appreciate that. And last but not least, Dick Purnell is here. He was a head football coach at Shikellamy on 3 different occasions, 3 different stints as head football coach. Certainly, it would be safe to say he's the winningest coach in Shikellamy history with 167 wins, and still, I'll tell you from being a Shikellamy graduate, is the standard by which other coaches are judged at Shikellamy. So, Dick, we thank you for coming up here today, too.
Thank you, Mark.
We really appreciate it. I'm going to ask everybody their story a little bit. I'll just start with Ray because you're first as we go back around the table. Your story, how did you get involved in coaching? What drew you to coaching? Tell us a little bit how this evolved in your younger life.
Well, it's going to be way back when I came from a coal mining town with Charleroi, western Pennsylvania, and basically everybody quit school by 8th grade, and I was one of them who was going to quit. And so this geography teacher says, Ray, why don't you go down to high school here and talk to some coaches? Maybe they'll keep you in school. I said, no, I don't want to know. I want to go to coal mines and work like everybody else. But no, he said, you're going to come with me. And so that was it. We went to the high school. And Rab Curry, who was a famous coach in Western Pennsylvania, he said, come on out, Ray. I said, no, gosh, I need a job. I need work. He said, come on out. If you don't make the team, then we can quit. So that was August 18th. That's when everybody started in those days. And so I made the team. We went to the practice squad, and then I graduated, and they said, you're going to go to college. I said, no, you see, I had to walk 9 miles after practice home for football practice, and then did wrestling, and then did track. So I said, no, I don't want to go to college. I don't have any clothes or got a family, 9 kids and mother and dad, so no way I was going to get there. But they coaxed me on, And so I finally wound up at Penn State off campus, couldn't afford to go on school, and that was it.
That's how you got into college. Now, after college, it came time for you to become a coach, initially wrestling. Tell me, what made you think that I'd like to guide some of these young men?
Well, I wrestled and played football at Penn State, and I needed a job, like everybody else, but I could coach football, I could coach wrestling, and I could teach shop. Lewisburg needed all three, and so I basically wound up there because of that.
Right, and you needed to pay the bills. That's the other aspect of this.
Right.
So that was, well, I guess next question, or same question to Dick Purnell. What made you get started in coaching?
Well, I'm from a different coal region than Ray. I had an altogether different background. Ever since I can remember, my dad told me, you're going to get an education, you're going to college, and you're going to get out of here. And I think a lot of people in the coal region were raised that way. And I can still remember him saying, if you ever set foot in a mine, I'll break your legs. But I think in college I started thinking about, I have one more year of football, and, gee, I really don't want this to end. And I got into thinking about coaching, and then had the good fortune to go up and stay with the Montreal Alouettes. I didn't play much, but I was on the team. I was second-string quarterback, and spent a year there, and really different outlook at football. Rules are a heck of a lot different and so forth. But then came back and taught in New Jersey for a couple of years, coached down there, had the good fortune to be hired as the head coach at Sunbury. And then when Chickalimi came, I became the head coach at Chickalimi, and from there on.
Well, let me ask you one quick question. By the time you retired with a winning record. Well, how did you know how to coach so well?
Well, I think we were successful. Phil always butts in when I say this, but one reason, one very good reason, of course, we had good kids, and he always butts in and says that, and we did. We had great kids. But I felt one thing that helped us an awful lot was we had, and when anybody who's going into coaching says, what do you suggest? I said, get the junior high phys ed teachers on your staff. And we had that, and therefore we got the right kids out for football. They were able to identify those kids in junior high and get them into the program. And I think that helped a lot. And another thing that I disagree greatly with today is the hire, for lack of a better term, townies as coaches. I think if you look at your successful programs, you'll see that Selinsgrove, Southern, they've had the same coaches forever, the same assistant coaches forever, and most of them are teachers, or at least enough teachers in the school to know what's going on with the kids. And I think that, in my mind, those are some of the things you need to be successful.
So you had a good connection with the kids, and you knew who they were. You probably knew who their folks were by the time that came around.
And we had a great staff at Chickalimi. Two of them sitting here now, and we're all on the same page and got things done.
Okay, Dick Quirk, same question. How did you get started in coaching? And then we're going to add to that too for you the winning years at Chickalimi.
My hometown had a terrific football program when I was growing up, and the head coach was very influential. And Dick talked about his dad saying that if he ever went into mines, he was going to break his legs. Well, my dad said the same thing about the river, but it's a little different. But you wanted to play for the guy because he was a legend, and everybody loved him. And the other coaches, the assistant coaches that were on his staff with him, you felt the same way about him, and they influenced you. And I thought that was the greatest thing in the world if I could go to college, and I was lucky enough to get a scholarship and go to school, and I wanted to become a coach, and it just mushroomed from there.
And what kind of level of I'll call it contentment did you have in your life when you were walking the sidelines, helping the team as an assistant, when you were doing what you did best and things were going well? How did that feel?
It's a great feeling when you're successful. Even there were times when you weren't successful. I can remember we lost to Berwick when Berwick was the #1 team in the country by the USA, the paper, the USA Today. and they were number 1 in the country. In the last play of the game, we lost the game 16-14, and that was a tremendous feeling because here's the number 1 team in the country, and we could have tied them. There were 10,000 people in Shikellamy Stadium that night. Nobody wanted to leave the stadium. The Shikellamy fans didn't want to leave. The Berwick fans didn't want to leave. The kids didn't want to leave the field. I think it took us about an hour to get from the Shikellamy Stadium up to the locker room, and we lost the game. But it was a great feeling because the kids played the way that we wanted them to play, and it was terrific.
And you shook your head yes when Coach Purnell was saying, well, we had the recipe of the assistants all the way through the school system, helped with the high school, and we knew the kids, and we had good kids.
Sure. You know, Don Maroney was a junior high phys ed teacher. And he was also a coach. And he would come up and say, hey, we got this kid. He's a nice-looking athlete. Doesn't do anything, We get him out. And some of these kids developed into great players. And the same thing Joe Robsock was over in the middle school in Northumberland. And Larry Sinibaldi. And for a while myself, when I was in the junior high school, and I got a kid one time who was a sophomore who turned into a heck of a football player, and he'd never played football before. He didn't even come out until after the season had started his sophomore year in high school. And he ended up being a real good football player for us.
All right. Do you ever remember Coach Maroney saying that I got this kid over at the middle school, Mark Lawrence? Did he ever tell you to watch out for him?
Yeah, he said we don't need him.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I definitely remember. Mr. Maroney is how we knew him. Well, I guess, Phil, same question to you. How did you get started in coaching? Of course, wrestling fame is really how your nameplate is known today, but how did all that begin?
Well, I think, Mark, it all goes back. I graduated from South Williamsport High School in 1955 and played football, and most of these guys in the room will know this, but a lot of people out there don't know I played basketball in high school. They didn't get wrestling till, I don't know, maybe I was a sophomore, and by that time I was established, and I was foolish not to go out for wrestling, but I didn't in high school. I went on to Bloomsburg, and I was running around with some guys who were on a wrestling team. And they talked me into coming out for wrestling, and of course we had a great coach in Russ Halk. And I learned a lot from Russ about coaching and how conditioning plays a very big part in any sport, but especially in wrestling. So I wasn't good enough to make the varsity. Bloom was pretty good in those days. But I liked the sport, and from there I went down and I got a teaching job at Mocknoy Joint, which is now the Lime Mountain School District. And I was down there 5 years as a football coach, assistant football coach under Clyde Miller, 4 out of those 5 years. And then was assistant to Barry Bauhartz in wrestling. And then Larry Sinibaldi, who was the head coach here at Chick, around 67, asked if I'd be interested in coming to Shikellamy to start a junior high wrestling program, which I did, and I was there for 3 years, junior high, before Larry invited me up to be the JV coach, and 4 more years. And in '74, Larry decided to retire and from coaching, and I applied for the head job at Chick, and I was fortunate enough to get that job. And 24 years later, I retired from it. So I enjoyed it, and of course we had a lot of success. And to repeat what Dick said, you have to have talent, and you have to have coaches. And I was very fortunate to have Robbie Johnson and Rod Jones, and a number of other ones that changed through the years, but John Subsick and so forth. We had a great staff, and it was a stable staff. You know, year in, year out, you had the same coaches and working on the same page. So it's been a good ride, but it was time to get off of it in '98.
Well, now, Coach Lockoff, I have to ask you, he said, Coach Purnell said, we had good kids, and you said, of course, that's important. What's a good kid? What is this character that these boys are bringing to your program?
Well, first of all, I think, we all agree that they have to be athletic. But more important than that maybe is the fact that they're coachable and that they're willing to put in the time and the work that's necessary to achieve to their ability. And so I think we're pretty much in agreement as to that's what makes a good kid.
Well, I think Dick Court said in some of the broadcasts, they're just good working class kids. That's what it is. They don't want something for nothing. Dave, same question to you. How'd you get involved to introduce yourself just a little bit more to our audience in case they're not as familiar with you?
Well, I don't think I'm too much different from most of the people here. I was influenced very young by a few key people. I was prompted to come out for sports when I was in junior high school. I had that coach, his name was Fairchild, who was in the program that you quickly identified with and gave you the leadership and encouragement. And I had pretty decent success in high school, but I was further influenced when I was playing sports in the service. At that time, the draft was in. We had a lot of ball players on the team who were college graduates, and some were quite well known. And the caliber of football that was played in the service at that time was very high. And that they don't do that anymore. They did away with that. But back then, we had 3 All-Americans on the team. We had half of Notre Dame's backfield in one of the teams we played against. So it was that caliber of football. And when I got out and went to college, I played for a line coach that went on to be the defensive line coach for Miami when he had that undefeated seasons. He was that caliber of a guy. So I was influenced by some very key people, and it helped build confidence and the basics involved with the football game, and also the confidence and desire to coach. And I had a very strong desire to coach. It's what I wanted to do. I started in Ohio. I was an assistant there 1 year. I took a program over that had, I think it was 13 years of losing football prior to that, and I didn't. When you're playing football, very often you're one-ended. If you're a lineman, you're kind of divorced from the backs. If you're a back, you're kind of divorced from the lineman, and that wouldn't seem like a big deal to the average fan. But when you come down to coaching, you've got to marry that real quick. And for me, that was an initial challenge, but I had the same thing that these gentlemen were talking to. I had encouraged some of the people I had played with at the collegiate level to coach with me. So we had a lot of success there from a standpoint of taking a program that was not competitive into one of the dominant programs the last couple of years there. And when I came into back here in Pennsylvania to Milton, it was a similar situation. We think we started the year with 20. I believe it was in the mid-20s, 25, 26 kids, and we ended it. We didn't have 20. We didn't have enough to play a JV team, and it was very tough. Well, in 3 years, we had a competitive program. We had over 100 kids out, so that was a key factor in us getting a senior class around that was going to be filling in those blank spots that you have to. And then you have a great athlete, he'll carry it, but you've got to have it. It's a team game. And we were very fortunate in that respect. It was something I enjoyed. I probably enjoyed the camaraderie I had with coaches, the opponents, as well as the people I had in our staff. He had a lot of common respect for the game and for the people. And it was, I think, a real good ride. The last few years when I took on the athletic directorship and attempted to coach was just beyond reality, because no matter what you were doing, you had something else to do there. And when you're an athletic director, nobody wants to know if you're having a good day. They always want something when when they're looking for you, and it's just not a good thing to try and marry that. I think Paterno tried it 1 year. I think he was smarter than I did. I did it for 13.
Kevin? Let me ask you this, Kevin, since you're at the microphone, and you're going to be asking some questions in a moment, but let me ask one to you. Mm-hmm. These guys are coaching in an era where football is critically important to the whole town. Has that era subsided somewhat?
In some parts of the country, maybe, and that's simply because there's more going on now than there was when these guys were head coaches. I mean, there was a Friday night where your choices were go to a football game or pretty much stay home. Now there's a lot more options that are available. And when you see places like Texas, or states like Texas, especially West Texas, high school football is huge there. Western Pennsylvania, big football area, and Pennsylvania in general. I would say when you look at the country, if you're looking for people that are coming out on Friday nights for a game, Pennsylvania has kept that mindset. So is Texas, of Friday night being high school football night. And I think that's why they came out with the show Friday Night Lights. I mean, that was based on that particular mindset, that Friday night, your job or your event that you were going to was going to be a football game.
Ray, how big was football at Lewisburg when you were coaching?
Well, it was pretty good, but it was dominated by well-to-do people. And we didn't send kids to school for athletic purposes to go on to college and play. They had the money in the background, so we just did it for fun, and had a good booster club. So I think we had no competition like soccer, and we had about 40, 50 kids out every year, sometimes 60. So I think Lewisburg did a good job. They supported their kids in football, and we went on from there.
Do some high school football programs have more fun at it?
More what?
More fun? More overall?
Yes, surely. Yes, yeah. But Mount Carmel, I don't know if the people have much fun down there. They eat, sleep, and drink football, and nothing else goes on. Whereas we football was over, you went home and you did other things. But I don't think it happens down Mount Carmel and a few other places.
No, the tailgating there starts at about 3 o'clock on a Friday afternoon for those games, and I'm not joking. They take their football seriously there. But, you had talked about not competing with soccer. I mean, you guys didn't have the situation where a lot of coaches do now, and that's looking toward the soccer program to finding a kicker. There are a lot of teams right now that have a kicker specialist, and this kid comes over from the soccer program, practices maybe 1 or 2 times a day or 1 or 2 times a week with the special teams, but is predominantly a soccer player. But that just didn't happen for you guys, did it?
In the 80s, soccer programs were there, and yes, 5 or 6 football players went to soccer. Bob Curtis's son, who coached football at Bucknell, he was one of them. Went from football to soccer. Rice was another one. Latour was another one that left the football program.
Dick Purnell, same question to you then. If you lost a player because he went to go do something else, what did he go do?
I don't think we lost any like that.
Okay.
You didn't lose any.
They didn't join the band or anything?
Well, when Denny Schneider was there, Denny Schneider and I had a great relationship. Now, we had kids in the band, Kevin.
Danny Troxel.
And Kevin.
Nevin Brungard.
Nevin Brungard, yeah. And it never was to the point like I see somewhere the kid comes out at halftime and plays in the band in his football uniform.
Yeah.
Our kids never did that, but they were in the band. I can't recall where somebody went and played another sport or something where we lost a kid that we were counting on.
Phil, you had a situation several times where Shikellami's football season went long into your wrestling season, so you lost a couple of your higher weights for guys that are playing the line. That had to be fun during wrestling season to fill those gaps in.
Well, that came in later on when I went into the playoffs. Having played football and coached football for Coach Purnell, I helped coach assistant for about 10 years for Dick. My theory has always been kids should play whatever they want to play, and play multiple sports. I mean, I grew up that way, so I kind of feel that way. But yeah, we just got them later on. It's not that we lost them. It's just a matter that they didn't get to the preseason practices.
Well, I think you've always had that. You can go back to some point. It's to the detriment of the athlete, I think, when you confine him. However, kids are different. Households are different. I can remember when there was a wholesale movement of moving kids to the wrestling program in one of the schools when I was at Milton, that they turned out to have a state championship. It was good for them, but it was the whole football team that went. It wasn't wrestling that was a problem. But my attitude with that is if these kids really want to do that and they had success, that was fantastic. It's no big deal. To a comment that was mentioned earlier, I think you've got to have fun when you're playing football. I don't think you can, if you're not having fun and working at it, you're not going to be too competitive. So I think that's a base in any of our programs. I had the distinction of playing in the first major collegiate game when a soccer kicker was used to kick field goals at Cincinnati in 1961. And so I was kind of open-minded to that. It was kind of funny. We were desperate to improve our kicking game. One of our coaches, Mo Scary, had played with the Cleveland Browns, was friend of Lou Groza, Lou the Toe Groza. Some of you may have heard of him. He came down in his hat, gold teeth, top coat, pointed shoes, and demonstrated kicking for our kickers, but it didn't help him. He couldn't kick for us. So we got a soccer player. And I don't know. I've never heard of another person, but I may be the only football coach who started a soccer program. I was the athletic director at Milton, and we had this interest in the local people of playing soccer. But when we started, we didn't have enough kids, and we didn't have a coach. And the people we interviewed for coaching would just laugh at us with our situation. But it was football season. I went out with the appointed soccer coach, Tom Aber, who didn't have any experience at. He was a custodian at the school, and we knocked on doors to start a program. So my feeling is, if it's helping kids, it's helping kids. And soccer player is a little bit different type of athlete than the interior lineman that you're going to have. The great athlete, we've had some of them that I think that moved over and played, but that's an individual thing. I really don't think it's an issue. It was a big issue at that time, but if you're helping kids and it's something that they're getting some benefit of, then we're on the right track.
We're about midway through a great discussion today with 5 great high school football coaches, and we are talking about high school sports, but we're talking about how it has changed for them and how the whole sport has changed. And we got the nearest thing to a Shikellamy Athletic Google team lined up here with Purnell, Hort, and Lockoff side by side. So any name you can almost watch like a computer search underway. These guys it'll clack through their brains and they'll come up with the right answer. If you name a high school football player from the Shikellamy era, they'll be able to tell you about it. We have more questions for them, but let me remind our audience who we're getting to talk to today. Shikellamy's great football coach, Dick Purnell, is here. Shikellamy high school football winning years is what has made his name recognizable around here. Dick Hort is here, was an assistant at Shikellamy for many years, also assisted at Susquehanna University, also played under Buddy Ryan, and that's a good asterisk on his record. Ray Patios is here. He was a wrestling coach at Lewisburg and a winning high school football coach, also played at Penn State University. Phil Lockoff is here, probably best known for his wrestling years, winning Pennsylvania Hall of Famer. He is today in the wrestling area, but also was an assistant high school football coach and was part of that team that Coach Purnell made reference to earlier in the show. That really was the recruiting effort that made Shikellamy a winning team. And Dave Six, you just most recently heard his voice. He was athletic director and head football coach at Milton. Also, he was very familiar with the Ohio high school football programs, also a year of assistant coaching. And all of these guys bring other football leadership and playing skills to our table. And they also are all well familiar with the next voice you're going to hear. Kevin Herr, WKOK's play-by-play announcer, does our Shikellamy high school football and our Shikellamy basketball. So he has even more questions for these guys.
We were talking a little bit about how specialization has come into some of these programs. Is a lot of that because of the pressure to find scholarships?
In the 50s, in my high school program, we had kids every year that were getting scholarships. They're certainly around today, and I think today probably the Division II, Division III programs do maybe a better job identifying kids and getting them into the Division II and Division III schools than they did back in my era. Then it was basically, you get a grant in aid, for a scholarship to play like Dave played at Cincinnati, and I know Dick went to the Naval Academy, and myself at Buffalo. Those people came around and recruited us, and they recruited heavily in this area. this particular area. I know in Ray's area out in western Pennsylvania, that was a hotbed. Notre Dame, Ohio State, Penn State, Pittsburgh, all those schools recruited heavily out there. So I think scholarships, and if you're a good enough athlete today, as back then, you could get a full ride somewhere. I think today it's changed a little bit in the type of athletes they want. They want kids, big linemen, 6'6", 280, 290 pounds. A lot of kids got scholarships that were defensive tackles back in the 50s and 60s that weighed 210 pounds. But it's changed somewhat.
Well, there have been always, Division I scholarships have been available for a little, but I think some of the smaller schools now and some of the smaller leagues, even, as I said, in the 1AA are now offering scholarships that hadn't before, and kind of opens up the door for players that are being not looked at by Division I to be able to get a scholarship and a full boat. Coach Purnell?
The thing with scholarships always intrigued me in that they expected, the high school coach has to get these kids scholarships. If Joe Paterno took who Dave Six recommended and Dick Purnell recommended and Ray Patios recommended, he would have been looking for a job a long time ago. They get filmed, they get tapes, they decide who is good enough to get a scholarship, not the high school coach. And it always bugged me, what percentage of kids who play these sports, take this whole area, the good programs, the not so good programs, whatever, how many of them really get a scholarship? What percentage of any athletics? And to make kids specialize for the few who do go on and get something out of it, how many pros from this area? I can think of Mike Messina in baseball and
Glenn Ressler
and Mount Carmel.
Danny Ficca
from Mount Carmel. That's about it, right?
Randy Sidler from Danville had the chance, he never went.
No, there's several people like that, I'm sure. But to specialize kids for that percentage of people who make it in college and then even less in pros.
Yeah, the percentages are really low.
I worry that when we were coaching last time, we had a kid by the name of Josh Paul. Josh was our quarterback. Josh played basketball. Josh played baseball. In the summer, poor Josh. we wanted Josh for 7-on-7. The basketball coach wanted him in the summer league. The baseball coach wanted him playing Legion baseball. The poor kid didn't know which way to turn, and
he was scholarship material.
I'm sure he didn't have time to go swimming.
Dave, scholarship pressure?
Well, the big difference, as far as my opinion goes, I don't think there's near the number of Pennsylvania athletes that are looked at in any scholarship sense compared to what it was back in the 50s and 60s, for a couple of reasons. Pennsylvania was one of the states where everybody went to for football players at that time. Now, if you look at it, they're going to the Gulf states is where they're looking at. That's where the athletes are coming from in the major programs, and look at some of the recruiting. And the other thing is the changes we've had in our racial situations in a way that the black athlete has had opportunities. If you were looking at programs in the 50s and the 60s and you looked at anything south of the Mason-Dixon line, you wouldn't think there's any black people down there because you didn't see them on their teams. Alabama, the Bear, when you ask him where he wanted his football players, and his statement was he wanted those beer-drinking kids from Pennsylvania, is what he said. And that's where he was recruiting at the time. But that situation has completely changed, and it has just made a total difference in regards to the number of scholarships, in my sense. And the other thing that I have a feeling that as a coach, you're constantly dealing with the parent who wants his kid to get a scholarship. Well, everybody would like to see him to have some success. But if you're looking at sport from that standpoint, number one, in football, it's a team game. You've got to play away from that from a standpoint of the individual emphasis for his person. You've got to be constantly working for the benefit of the team. And the cream comes to the top. The athletes that are going to be worthy aren't going to be overlooked in today's world.
Okay. Ray?
Well, I think this is not a hotbed for football in this area here, and therefore the high school, college coaches are not looking in this unless there's something outstanding. But you look at the other sports, lacrosse, basketball, field hockey, those people are getting full-time scholarships. So it is a hotbed in some sports. It's just not football.
Wrestling is a little different than what you fellows been talking about. Pennsylvania is considered one of the top recruiting states in the nation. They look at Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, and Virginia as the wrestling hotbed, so to speak. So maybe unlike what you're saying about football, wrestling actually is high up for recruiting in the state.
Is part of that because of the success of Penn State, of Lock Haven, of Bloomsburg in the wrestling programs?
Oh yeah, most definitely. And
I mean, there's three schools that can go in their backyards.
Yeah, national championships are coming out of the Iowa, but Iowa recruits in Pennsylvania, so yeah, unlike maybe what Dave was saying about scholarships in football, in wrestling they're very much in the making.
Let me ask everybody here at the table individually. I guess I'll just start with Dave. Why are some teams better than others? Why is, when you were coaching, Milton just seemed to win each year, and now they have some struggles. Shikellamy, of course, won many a year, and now there's some struggles. What happens that this evolution goes through?
I have some pretty strong beliefs, and of course they're mine. Anytime a coach moves away from fundamentals, from the standpoint of teaching the basic skills that are necessary, he's going in the wrong direction. You see that so much, particularly with young coaches. They watch too much of the more advanced programs in professional and collegiate ball, and they try every new little thing that comes down the pike. But when they get on defense, they don't have any block protection, and next thing you know, they're turning the corner, and all of a sudden their field position and all those little parts of the game that are controllable with better individual play and team play, particularly the basic skills. They're the things that are so glaring when you look at the highly successful program when they're playing other programs that haven't had that success. And the other thing is this: you got to win. And consequently, if you're not winning, you're enough to be games enough to be competitive. People don't identify with it. The fans surely won't, and the kids don't like to be connected with that. And it's kind of a catch-22 in the fact that you've got to have athletes, but you've got to develop them, and then you need numbers, because if you don't have sufficient kids out to where you can't field enough ball players to stay healthy, you're not going to be competitive. And when you can turn around and look at that senior class of 15 to 20 kids where you've got them moving into those positions that have experience, and everybody's going to work around the football to put it in a better athlete's hand or work to stop that athlete, you can be competitive then. So to me, it's basic fundamentals and numbers.
If I can interrupt what Dave's saying, I remember the first year Dave came to Milton. And before that, when we played Milton, it was always gimmick, would be something altogether different than we scouted or blah, blah, blah. And if I recall, you sat in a 6-3. Am I right? Yes. And I saw that and I thought, uh-oh, they're going to get a heck of a lot better because there were no gimmicks. It was going to be fundamental football, and we're gonna play football.
I think you were the last. I think you were the last coach to use a 6-3 in high school too. Now it's all 3-5s. Now it's all 3-5 defense.
Phil, what's the reason that sometimes the teams are so much better at one year and then not the next, and one town's better? What happens that one team's doing really well? Is it the coaching, or maybe the?
Well, I think it's a combination, Mark, of we had a long-term success here in the 80s and early 90s, and it was due to, I think, the fact that our coaching staff was stable. We had good people, and obviously we had good athletes. And there's such a thing out there. You can have good athletes, but if they're not coached properly, it doesn't matter. So, and of course, you can go to the other perspective that you don't have any athletes, and no matter how hard you coach, you can coach them as individuals, and they learn to appreciate the sport, but you may not have success because you don't have. So I always felt if you have good athletes, you better have good coaching and take care of those.
Ray?
There's one other part we forgot: economics. Towns are losing population. Dave Six is one with ConAgra. There's good there, but they lost so many other industries. Danville, I think, is another one that loses. So you can't control that. And as far as good athletes coming, I think coaches have nothing to do with that. They're there and they're gone. And then they come in the next 10 years, you may not have any. So you see the teams are successful. You look at them 10 years later, they're not. And you can't, in high school, recruit like they do in college.
Oh, some people do.
I knew somebody was going to say that.
You're not talking about Berwick, I guess.
No.
That's debatable. I mean, there's always been that discussion.
I think one other thing we're missing, though, is attitude. I can go back to 1966, and I don't know if, Dick, you were, when did you come?
66.
All right. We didn't have good we didn't have a lot of good football players like we had in 65. We had Junior Waller. But we had a whole bunch of kids that no way in heck were they going to lose. I mean, every time they went on the field, they expected to win. And somehow, some way, they were going to win. And, boy, you go from you expect to lose to, well, we might lose to, we have a chance. Well, maybe we can win. And then you expect to win. And it's a whole.
and you're right. It's the old adage, winning breeds winning. When you have that attitude that you can win, and when you do end up getting down in a game, you're not down and out. I mean, when you have a program that has not had much success, when you fall a touchdown or two behind, that can be almost enough to end a game early. If you're down 2 touchdowns in the first quarter, if you have a program that hasn't won quite a bit, it's going to be easy not to have that attitude that you're talking about.
I mean, in 65, we had great football player. We had a whole bunch of, we had a great team, but in 66 we had a lot of things to fill in. And there were a lot of kids that had no experience, had nothing, but they just weren't going to lose. They weren't going to be the first team in the history of Shikellamy to lose a football game. I can still remember them saying that.
I think that everybody's touched on most of the things that you need to be successful, why some people are successful. But I really feel personally that it's coaching staff, and particularly the stability in the coaching staff. And Dick touched on this earlier, when you have people in place, which we did at Shikellamy for year after year after year after year after year, everybody knows what's expected of them. They know how the program operates. And when we got those kids at the varsity level, after being in our program, they were on the same page. And we didn't have to waste a whole lot of time teaching kids a lot of stuff because they already were indoctrinated with it, and we could go from there. We could build on that. And I think it was just a series of steps each year, and you got the most out of the kids. You got to have good kids, but we got the most, I think, most of the time out of most of our kids because they were in a program where they knew what was expected, and when we got them, they were ready to go.
Well, you talked about that, Coach, and that's what I wanted to just jump in with was, when you talk about coaching, it's not just at the varsity level. It's the varsity level, the junior varsity level, the junior high level, all the way down to your 8-year-olds coming up in your youth program, knowing the basics and knowing fundamentals, and that's where I think a lot of coaches now are starting to build their program right at the 8-year-old level by saying, okay, here's what we want you to work on, so when they come up through the ranks into junior high and junior varsity, we don't have to go over it anymore.
The thing is, though, I always said with a drill, when you set up a drill so a kid's going to be successful. You don't want a drill that's going to make them fail. You want it to be successful. And before I said there were 2 things I felt made us successful, and I only said one, and that was junior high coaches. The other one, for years, we had a separate JV program. They practiced separately. And I felt that, at the time when we first started, we didn't have 9th grade in our high school. But still, we didn't have 9th graders playing varsity. We had sophomores. But I always thought, when I was a kid, I remembered a guy down the block that was 2 years older than me. I was scared to death of him. Now all of a sudden I'm on a football team and somebody expects me to go head-to-head with this kid. And, some kids will do that, but a lot of kids won't. And I can think of several different examples that when they were sophomores, the JV coach said, this kid will never play for you. and there were two brothers. One of them started his junior and senior year and was on the 65 team. And the other one, he didn't make it till he was a senior, but he was a good football player. And mainly because if you'd have thrown them into the mix with kids that were beating the heck out of them, they'd have quit. I
can remember one kid, and I won't mention any names, but I had him in 8th grade here at Chickalimmy. And he couldn't go on the field. I mean, we tried to get all the kids in as much as we could, but he couldn't start. He wasn't a kid. If you really wanted somebody in there, he wouldn't have been on the field. He was in 8th grade. Next year, he went to the 9th grade program, or he was in 9th grade, and he couldn't start on the 9th grade team. I went to the JVs the next year. He came to the JVs. He couldn't start for us on JVs. As a junior, he started in JVs. Couldn't make the varsity, but he started for us in JVs. As a senior, he was a starting linebacker and he ate people alive. And there's two stories there. A lot of kids today won't go through that progression. In 8th grade, if they don't start, they don't play, they don't get a lot of playing time, that's it, they're done, they quit. Because the coach is picking on them or whatever. But this kid stuck with it, and he was a heck of a football player as a senior. And he just matured, he grew up.
It's really nice when you have a situation like Dick was talking about where you can take that sophomore group and let them grow. I always felt if I had a sophomore that could play, first of all, I'm in pretty bad shape because he's going to screw up because he's a sophomore, and it's going to be a while he comes around. And some people say for every sophomore you're playing, you schedule a loss there because of the competitive nature in the tougher games. But when you can put them in it where they have group identity, where their game is a big game, it's all positive for them. But when you have to pull kids that have to play both ways and it's a drag, and you're trying to get ready for one game and playing the last week's game, that's hard. It's hard for them and hard on them.
Horty, you talked about it a few seconds ago about not staying with it long enough to see what kind of a player certain players are going to be. Part of that, I think, has to do with the push that parents have that if my son or daughter isn't playing, that it's not worth it anymore. Now, I mean, you guys have 1,000, 1,500 other coaches sitting in the stands that know better than you do on who should be playing and who shouldn't be playing. How do you handle that in a diplomatic way?
Well,
or don't you?
It's tough. I can remember a few years ago, Chickalimmy had 39 kids in their 8th and 9th grade program, and the next year they had to drop the 9th grade program because they didn't have enough kids. And somebody asked, how do you know when you're coaching a kid, whether you have a good kid or not? I always found out one rule of thumb. If I had a kid that wanted to please me as a coach, he was going to be successful. If he didn't want to please his dad, if he wanted to please his dad or listen to his dad or his uncle or his brother or whoever, the townies, you had problems. But if the kid wanted to please you, the coaches, you were getting somewhere. You're going to get something out of that kid.
That's a coachable kid. That's what you would define as a coachable kid.
I would say so.
I always wondered about parents who think their kid should be playing, and we're not playing them for some awful reason. They have no idea how bad we wanted to win. That we weren't going to play the best kids.
But they are the best kids.
Who, their kid?
Yeah. That's what the parents told you.
Well, that's their opinion.
Ray, parental pressure.
Well, I try to ignore it. I know some parents would like you hang out with them all the time so you can play their kids. I never did do that and never catered to the powers to be, except in the administrative level now. I don't know. I guess a lot of you people remember I got fired back about 1974, and we won the championship that year. The reason was I called the plays. And a lot of people came back and says, Ray, in college, that became a real good topic. Should the coach call the plays? And he said, we lasted weeks discussing that. And I got hired back in the following month. But anyway, I try to ignore the parents and not talk about football if I can and just go on as they are.
I guess we're going to have to get some closing remarks here, and we'll get to our last question. So let's start into that now. But unfortunately, the way we're going, this will probably be the last question. How important is high school football today? Is it still the character building, patience building, parental involvement, fill up the sidelines like it used to be? We'll start with you, Ray. How important is high school football today?
Much more important today. TV, media, radio, newspapers. So yeah, I think it's going way up top of the stock.
Dick?
I think we talked on the phone, and when we were winning, it was a whole town thing, and it was this and that, and I'm sure it was a whole town and whole area thing out at Southern, and it's a whole town and area thing at Selinsgrove right now. And if Milton starts winning, it'll be a whole town thing there, which they should. They got a great kid. He played for you, right? Played for me at Susquehanna. He's going to be a good coach.
But and how important is high school football today, Dick?
I agree with Ray. I think it's more important than ever. I think one of the worst things that ever happened to this country was the abolition of the draft back in the Nixon administration. And I think a lot of kids, kids were kids then like they are now, but they rode along with the wave, and then they had that 2-year military obligation, and a lot of kids grew up in a hurry and got disciplined in the service. And today, sociologists tell us they're not getting it in the home, they're not getting it in school, and I think a football field is one of the few places anymore where kids have to be disciplined. Sure, it's an aggressive game. You can take your aggressions out on the football field, but you got to do it under a strict set of rules. You got to follow the guidelines. You got to be disciplined. And I think in my own case, that was a big factor in my life, and I think it's more important than ever for that reason.
Okay, Phil, we're talking about how important high school football is, but we'll just correlate it to how important is high school athletics in general and wrestling too.
Well, there's no question about it. Football is number one. I'd like to sit here and tell you wrestling is, but in reality, as far as comparing the two across the country or in the state, football is, and it always has been, because as TV became, people watch more television than collegiate sports and then professional sports. So football is real big, and I'd like to say all athletes are equal, but they're not as far as their attention.
Okay, Dave?
You're talking fan attention and fan appeal, and we do have more people that are involved with that. But athletics in general, I think, and any extracurricular activity that give kids opportunity is great. I am really proud to be involved with the game of football and seeing the better programs and the number of kids that are out. And I think that it's very important as far as the opportunities for kids to learn to give of themselves. It's the ultimate of a team game. There's 11 people that are busting their rear on a give and play with everything they have for the advancement of the football, which is one person, but it is a team game, and it's transferable to a lot of life challenges you have. So I think it's very important.
In school, it's very individual. How did you do on this test? This is your grade. In sports, whether it be football, basketball, baseball, wrestling, it's more of a learning to work together to try and be successful. I mean, there are a few situations where one particular player may stand out over another, but for the most part, as Coach Hort said, it's discipline, doing your job, and the negativity sound of don't let your teammates down. Nobody really likes to say that because it sounds negative, but that's part of team building. When you work in a working environment, when you're in a work environment, you're working as a group of people to be successful. You're working as a team, and you don't want to let the person next to you down, because if you happen to not do your job properly, Mark, if I don't happen to program something properly, or I don't go out and do a football game, as the program director in the of this radio station, you have to figure out a way to make it fix. And I've let you down and let everybody else down on our staff. And
sadly, yeah, often.
And I think that's something that's missed in sports in general. It is it's very much an educational setting that you wouldn't be able to get necessarily in the classroom.
Okay, we do have time for a quick closing remark. So just one additional statement, the topic of your selection. Dave, anything to add for the good of the order today?
We're coming on to a new high school football season. This is the biggest thing in those kids' life right now. And if we can do anything to keep the sportsmanship level from a standpoint of the support from the fans to on-the-field play, I think that would be a good move.
Coach Lockoff, some additional thoughts today?
I just think that as we approach the football season, I'd like to repeat what Dave said, to keep the sportsmanship in mind, keep it in fact that it's a game. We'd like to think as coaches it's a way of life, but these kids have other things to do also, so we have to keep things in their perspective. And so the parents have to do that, and the fans have to remember it's just a game.
Coach Hort.
I'd just like to say to thank you people for the diligence that you must have put in selecting this wonderful staff.
The panel that's on this table, it's all off.
Thanks, Coach. I appreciate that. It's the nicest thing you've said to me in 15 years.
It was random selection. It's just the middle of the alphabet. All the other coaches, DeFrancesco and so on, are all earlier or later in the alphabet. Coach Purnell.
Well, earlier Ray brought up about fun, and Dave talked about it, and we had a great program, but we had Hort. So we had a lot of fun, believe me.
So there's a lot of laughter and a lot of just...
I have him every day. I can
tell you some real stories, but I don't think you want them on the radio.
I know some of them, and no, I don't want.
And Ray, I'm sorry to put you amongst some of this rabble-rousery, but...
Well, thanks for having us, and I think we covered it all, but I did want to say one thing. I did play with some good coaches in mind. Joe Paterno was assistant coach when I was at Penn State, Rip Ingo, and Charlie Spidell was a wrestling coach, and he was one of the greatest. So thanks for having us.
You're quite welcome. Thanks for coming in, Kevin.
Well, as you said, Mark, football season's about ready to get underway, and one thing that I would encourage all the players, parents, is when you see stuff in the NFL and on TV, don't emulate it. There's a lot of...
You mean bad behavior?
Well, that's what I'm talking about. There's a lot of things that go on in the NFL and professional sports that you'd never want to see. There's a lot of showboating that goes on there, and you see it start to trickle down at the youth level, and it's kind of disappointing to see stuff like that go on. They're not necessarily role models in the NFL to be watched. They are players. They are entertaining to watch, and it's great to see an athlete who has the talent that some of these guys have perform their sport. But remember, they make mistakes, and don't emulate some of those mistakes.
Well, you're listening to our Roundtable program. You just heard the voice of Kevin Herr. He's WKOK's play-by-play announcer for Shikellamy High School football and some of the wrestling. Occasionally, you even heard him do a little bit of that. And he is here to tell us that the football season's getting underway. We had some great coaches. He suggested this particular panel, and we'll have more coaches on. If your favorite coach wasn't on this show, do stay tuned. In the months ahead, we'll have more coaches on our show today, really to talk about how athletics has changed in the high school football scene has changed. So Kevin was on our show. Coach Dave Six was here. He was the athletic director and head football coach at Milton. For some strange reason, he wanted to do it all. Necessity, he says, was a factor there. Also very familiar with the Ohio high school football programs. Was an assistant at Susquehanna University. Phil Lockoff was here. Really made famous with the wrestling program at Shikellamy, but also was an assistant high school football coach and brought a great deal of experience to the sidelines at a number of endeavors too, and on the playing field. And we're glad to say he assists with our play-by-play announcing of the wrestling that we do, match side announcing here on WKOK. Ray Patios, rarely on the radio, but we're glad he was back today. He was a head wrestling coach at Lewisburg and a head high school football coach, played at Penn State, and as we mentioned at the beginning, Myron Patios is his brother, so you can find the name Patios in record books if you search far and wide. And Dick Hort was on our show today. He too, a voice on WKOK, was an assistant at a number of winning football programs around here at Susquehanna University, Shikellamy, Shikellamy. Montgomery High School played at the University of Buffalo under Coach Buddy Ryan, which we think is a good asterisk, and Buddy Ryan coached the Philadelphia Eagles, among other places. And Coach Dick Purnell was here, certainly the winningest coach, 167 wins, but has been here to tell us that as he coached, it was parents in the community that sent him the kids. He molded them, but they sent them, and that's something that we think he says modestly and was grateful for during his tenure as a football coach. I'm Mark Lawrence. Thank you for joining us on Roundtable.